This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel, broadcasting remotely. Connecticut has relaxed some COVID-19 restrictions, and more residents have been vaccinated in recent weeks. This as the state passes 300,000 cases since the pandemic began. Today, Where We Live, Governor Ned Lamont joins us to talk about this milestone and the next months ahead. Now, do you have a question for Governor Lamont? Here's the number to call in, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR. You can also share a comment on our Facebook page or find us on Twitter at Where We Live. Governor Lamont joins us now on Zoom. Governor, how you doing?
Good morning, Lucy.
We know the 1 year anniversary of Connecticut's pandemic shutdown was earlier this month. We know the pandemic changed your job considerably. So what did you reflect on when we reached that 1 year date, Governor?
I reflected on the fact that we were hit hard, we were hit early. Nobody knew anything. Washington, D.C. was asleep at the switch. And I thought Connecticut really stood up. I thought our hospitals helped take the lead. Our life sciences, bioscience, Yale, New Haven, UConn, Jackson were extraordinarily helpful as we had to, do this on our own. We found some business folks that helped us secure PPE, in particular masks, when there was no such thing as a stockpile in Washington, D.C. And also think about the incredible tragedy of 7,000 plus fatalities. We were hit particularly hard. And I think in part, Lucy, that's why Connecticut recovered particularly well. Governor of Arizona said, I can't take my folks in Arizona to take it seriously. They know somebody's lost a job, but they don't know somebody who's lost their life. And we knew here in Connecticut, we knew people who lost a job and we knew people that lost their lives. So Connecticut took the lead on this, took it well. And I think that served us over the last 8 or 9 months.
Do you have any regrets or things you would have done differently when you look back over the leadership that you've shown over the last 12 months, Governor?
Well, certainly, if we'd done everything a month earlier, we would have been a month better off. If we had started trying to secure masks in January and not February, if I could have convinced everybody to stay at home in January and not in early March, those things would have made an enormous difference. But I don't think we could have done that. I can't tell you stay at home when there's something going on in Wuhan and Seattle and you don't quite know what it is. I wouldn't have had the moral authority to have people take the urgency of this as serious as they could. But those are the things that would have made a difference. We were slightly fortunate, I would say, in that we did things alongside New York and New Jersey. And they were about 3 weeks ahead of us in the COVID pandemic back in March and April. So that did put us ahead of the curve compared to our peers, which was very helpful.
I'm glad you brought up what neighboring states were doing and how you all tried to work in tandem. We know just last Friday, I believe, a lot of the COVID restrictions have been relaxed in terms of capacity and gatherings can be larger. Obviously, bars are still closed, but New Jersey's governor says high cases there mean that the state won't relax restrictions. So why deviate from that regional approach now?
Look, We've maintained, Joe Biden called the Texas governor Neanderthal. I've joked I'm a Neanderthal with a mask. I'm doing the things that work and maintaining the mask mandate as long as I can or a little longer. I've got to negotiate with legislature on that. The 6 foot of social distancing, especially in places like restaurants. So you're right. Well, I said restaurants and retail stores can open at 100%. For many restaurants, that was not a big change. And they understood it because they know that people are not inclined to go into a restaurant if they see it's really crowded indoors, or even people aren't being respectful of the mask, at least when they're walking between tables. So I really wanted to emphasize the things that work and are enforceable. And, unlike New Jersey, we did keep in place 11 o'clock curfew for reasons I think many people understand.
This week, the Hartford Courant reported that Connecticut ranked 7th nationally in daily cases per capita over the last week. That's from CDC data. And the weekly positivity rate has increased this month. Deaths related to COVID-19 are slowly rising. Hospitalizations have plateaued. Are you concerned? Should we be concerned when we hear about these new variants also in our state?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, look at Brooklyn and Queens and southern New Jersey. Those variants are spiking up. I've seen this movie before. Look where we were exactly a year ago. We were New York City sneezes and we catch colds. So, yeah, I watch this carefully. But I also know that, we're not Europe, which has been a crystal ball. We've got, over a third of our people have had their first vaccination. And probably when you count, Lucy, the folks who were previously infected, younger folks, I bet it's closer to 50%. So I'd like to think that we're ahead of this, these potential variants out there. And remember, so far it seems that the vaccinations work against most of the variants that we hear out there.
When I mentioned the new variants, how is the state tracking them, including this New York variant?
I can tell you that I talked to folks like Scott Gottlieb and Zeke Emanuel and Jeff Zients, who runs the COVID force for the White House. So they are monitoring what's going on in different regions. You're absolutely right. I mean, you said we're relatively high now in terms of confirmed infections per 100,000. We do a lot more testing than they do in Mississippi. But more importantly, our region is, being hit a little bit by some of these variants. We're low compared to our neighbors, but we're high compared to the rest of the country. So we're tracking this carefully. We're doing as much of the genetic sequences as we can to test this on our own. And you're right, the UK variant is going to be probably a bigger percentage of our infections over the course of the next month. But the vaccines work.
When I mentioned the variants and how the state's tracking them, I understand that Yale and Jackson Lab have been looking at new variants, but there's no formal agreement. So how close is Connecticut to launch a statewide genomic surveillance project?
As Josh, I think our main limitation is capacity right now. Doing the genetic sequencing to see whether this is South African or Brazilian seems to be a complicated process. So I don't know whether we've done, a few hundred of these tests and extrapolate from there, but we are doing more just so we stay ahead of this variant every day.
Again, you can join our conversation if you have a question for Governor Ned Lamont, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter @Where We Live. I wanted to talk about how vaccinations are going, Governor Lamont. The New York Times has these great graphics on its website about vaccinations across the U.S., and I thought it was interesting. One of the maps, Connecticut shares a space with Idaho and Maine as the only states not prioritizing high-risk adults for COVID vaccines. Do you still stand by your decision to do an age-based distribution plan?
Yeah, but I'm going to take issue with your question. Just remember that the overwhelming majority of comorbidities are related to people who are 65 and above, then 55 and above, and now 45 and above. So I think you're going to find that when we prioritize age, we are taking care of those not only had comorbidities, but the most risk of complications and hospitalizations. And I do think that, you can go to howdoijumpaheadoftheline.com down in New York. Everybody's playing games. And, I used to be a smoker and ways that the line is being jumped. And it's we have really been prioritizing based on age, as you say, Lucy. People have been honoring that. We have a much higher percentage of our older population vaccinated because other people can't game it. And I think that serves us well. And in less than 2 weeks, it's going to be open to everybody. And our hospitals are doing outreach now to the folks they think are most severely at risk to make sure they come in and get vaccinated.
So let's spend some time on this. You said you take issue with the way I asked that question, but there are many people in our state who are not over 65 or over 55 or over 45 who have high risk conditions. Kaylee tweeted at us, people as young as in their 20s, including her, have been told by their doctors they're high risk. They should continue to lock down and isolate. And what are you doing to support them? We know that isolation this past year has been a detrimental thing for many people.
I would just say that the majority of folks with those comorbidities in the 45 and above category, we've got work to do. I would tell that your listener within 2 weeks, she or he will be able to get the testing as well. And remember the CDC guidelines for what they quote unquote called, comorbidity or high risk included mild obesity, included smoking, it included over half of the population of the state of Connecticut. So I could have prioritized all them, and then I'm not really prioritizing anybody because there's so many people, going to the gate at the same time. Look, my heart goes out to the person that texted you that. And I know staying close to home for another 2 or 3 weeks until you can get the vaccine is incredibly painful, but we're getting there. We're getting there faster than any other state in the country.
When you talk about the vaccine distribution plan and members of your team, everyone's really positive. The fact that doses, of course, that the supply has increased compared to just a few months ago. But so many residents, Governor, are frustrated when it is their time to sign up. The system is very fragmented. It takes them a long time to try to find a vaccine. I mean, what can you tell people about this process to make it easier for them? And not everyone has time, multiple devices to try to find a vaccine when you've got CVS and Walgreens. There's the VAMS system. People can call up Hartford Healthcare or Yale New Haven Health, and people are still waiting.
I mean, I would say, look at Florida. Look at those places where they opened it up to everybody. A little bit of first come, first serve. You saw those long curling lines. Seniors waiting for hours in the hot sun, and then they finally get there and find out, oh, sorry, we're out for today. Well, we're not allowing that to happen. I understand the frustration. That's why we opened it up on a sort of every 2 or 3 weeks to a narrower cohort. You're right. Those first week or so, everybody's wants to get vaccinated at the same time. But then by the second or third week, you have more availability. I get it. I don't know, when Joe Biden said, we're going to set up a website to make it easier for you, I had a little shiver, I got to admit. But right now, my advice to you would be, go to CVS, go to Walgreens, go to VAMS. We can direct you based upon zip code, and you go to our site, the VAMS site, where the available vaccines are and get you onto that CVS site. It's not something we totally control, Lucy. Remember, the feds, they direct money to the pharmacies, and the pharmacies do their own allocation, their own appointments. So it's not something we totally control, but it's something I got to make easier. And I don't want to be disrespectful, but the younger the age group, the easier it is for them to do it online.
Molly tweeted at us, she wanted to share, I think challenges will remain as long as you ask people to be in charge of making their own appointments. Vaccines need to get to people without them needing to do anything. So how can Connecticut make that work in the next few weeks as more doses come online, Governor?
I think Molly's half right there. I mean, for the worried well, that group that's sitting there refreshing on their VAMS website at 12:01 in the morning, they seem pretty capable of getting their own appointments. I really worry about the underserved communities, the Black and brown communities, the folks that have been hardest hit by COVID, the folks who are most at risk. And there, I've got to continue to do better. And Molly's absolutely right. We don't sit around waiting for you to make an appointment. We take that mobile van right to your community. We have people dialing out to get you to come in, to make an appointment for you, to make that appointment for you. We write out the appointment to make it easier. And look, we got a long way to go. We prioritized probably the 50 most vulnerable SVI, socially vulnerable districts, and that represents about 25% of our folks. Last I saw, they've had 22% of the vaccine, so it's not equal yet, but we're going to do more than equal. We're going to continue to try and make progress there.
There are a lot of people critical about this plan, or even how the state tried to reach out or maybe didn't do enough to reach certain communities. We spoke to State Senator Douglas McCrory on Where We Live just last week, and he did not give high marks to the state and the Department of Public Health for vaccine outreach and access to certain communities. This is what he told us.
Always have to be an extension of the governor's authority. Why don't we look at what's good? Codify it. What needs modification, modify. What isn't applicable, we can leave behind. But let's start that process so that by April 20th, we're ready to move forward as a state.
And that's the wrong clip. Here's Senator McCrory.
We know this issue was coming. I think we should have did a better job of planning. I don't think we did a good job of outreach. I don't think we did a good job of educating the communities about this vaccine. And therefore, you saw communities, especially communities where people were a little hesitant.
Governor Lamont, how do you respond to that?
Well, the first clip, when Doug is saying, let's get the legislature and codify some of these things. You've been in session since early January. Feel free to step in. The water's great. I'd love your support and codify those that you should be. Look, in terms of the outreach, what I can tell you is we have thousands of, we've made 300,000 calls have come into our 211 center. We have made thousands of calls calling out to people, telling them how important it is. We've had friends and friends of friends calling in to make sure people know what they want to do. We prioritized, say, nurses in the nursing homes. We brought the vaccine to them. This was 2 months ago. We said, this is the right thing to do for you and your family, and not to mention the folks in the nursing home. And say a third of the people said, I'll get vaccinated, and 2/3 said, I think I'd like to wait a little bit longer. We came back 3 weeks later, and another third got vaccinated. So we're going to keep coming back until everybody gets vaccinated. And I think, Lucy, this is a problem that's going to actually get a little tougher over the next month when people start feeling a little more relaxed, and maybe younger people don't feel the urgency to get vaccinated. I'm going to have to work really hard to make sure we get up to 80-90% people vaccinated. So I can use your help there.
Lee's calling in with a question for Governor Lamont. You can too, 888-720-9677. Lee, go ahead.
Hi, a New Yorker who admires the governor's leadership. Question for you. Next time we have a respiratory disease on the horizon, and it's a January like it was last time, can we do a mask mandate, which is a low-cost, early threat approach, rather than a full lockdown, maybe even not have a lockdown, get people to wear masks?
I think that's something we got to look at, to tell you the truth. Obviously, when things are really severe, having people shelter at home, be at home, not interface with all their friends, even with a mask, probably makes sense. But I think we've also realized there's nothing more impactful than wearing the mask. That's why here in the state of Connecticut, we're relaxing the capacity restrictions, but maintaining the mask. That's why I worked like heck to get our schools open in September when people were a little anxious about that. But we mandated the mask. The mask is the thing we realize is the best defense we can play, and the vaccine's the best offense.
We're going to take some more calls with Governor Ned Lamont here on Where We Live. The number 888-720-9677. Back after a short break. This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. We're talking with Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont. If you have a question, you can join us, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Diane's calling in from Avon. Diane, go ahead.
Hi, Governor. First of all, I wanted to tell you that you have done an outstanding job. I can't even imagine all the behind-the-scenes stuff that goes on. Some of the questions that I had, you already answered on the show, but I did want to ask, I've been vaccinated. I did go through the tedious steps to try and get my spouse an appointment, and he got his first vaccination yesterday. We're waiting for our adolescent to be able to be vaccinated because she has an asthma issue, so that puts her at higher risk. But my question is, with the relaxation of all the restrictions and the capacity with the restaurants, and people are eating and they have their masks off, are you nervous that this is going to be a spike? And what do you expect to have happen if you see a spike? Like, what will be the reaction? Are we going to roll back? I'm sure you have a plan B in place in case. Just wondering.
Yeah, no, thanks for that question, Diane. And I think I'm paid to be nervous. So, first of all, isn't it sort of liberating getting that vaccine? It doesn't mean we relax our caution or put down our guard, but I had my second shot 10 days ago, and it feels good. I think seniors do feel a little more comfortable getting out and seeing their grandchildren. I think that's extraordinary positive. So far, we haven't had to roll back. I've opened pretty cautiously going back to May 20th. I avoided what, other states were doing. Let's have a pause. Let's stop. Let's start. Let's roll back. We haven't been perfect, but I've tried to be consistent on that. I hope that what we've done in the last week when it comes to restaurants and stores works, which is 6 foot of social distancing, really important, and wearing the mask. I think those are the two prime things that are going to make a difference. If New York City goes on fire again, like happened a year ago, and all of a sudden it starts coming up that Metro North corridor, you're right. We'll have to, take a second look at where we are. I don't think that's going to happen. I think probably close to 50% of our people at this point have either been vaccinated or previously had a mild infection, so they have some antibodies. So I'd like to think we're going to stay ahead of this virus.
Earlier, we heard State Senate Minority Leader Kevin Kelly. That clip played in error, but he was referring to the emergency authority that you've had over the last year, and now the Courant and others have reported the State House of Representatives will vote tomorrow on whether to extend your emergency powers at least for a little bit longer. So tell us some more about why this extension is needed, Governor.
I think specific to public health, it's necessary. Look, you just heard, Molly and Diane say, what happens with these variants? I see that you've got parts of Brooklyn and Queens with a 15% infection rate. What happens if it comes up to Connecticut? What are we going to do? And at that point, we may have to change course. At some point, we may have to accelerate our vaccination program when we get another 200,000 doses from J&J, which looks like could happen in the next month. So we want to make sure we have some flexibility when it comes to public health. So that's really important. Going forward, like I said, if the legislature says, I don't like this mask mandate, or I'm ready to open up the bars, or if they have any specific objections, they're in session. They can step up. I wish we'd talk about it first, but that's certainly their prerogative.
Again, you can join us at 888-720-9677 or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Mary's calling in from Simsbury. Mary, go ahead.
Hi, Governor Lamont. First of all, thanks for all the great work you're doing here in the state. My question is, I have a 99-year-old mom who has her vaccination, is dying to get back to her senior center, and it seems to be the last group that is getting any kind of opening. I was wondering two things. When do you foresee giving the thumbs up for senior centers to open? And the second thing is, are you looking at maybe a vaccine passport to ensure their safety and to make them feel safer going into these buildings? But it's been a while since they've had that contact. Zoom has gotten old for them. And I know every day my mother asks me, when are they going to open it? And I'll hang up to have you answer that question. Thank you.
Yeah, Mary, God bless your mom. Let me give her a call on her 100th birthday. Let me think about the senior centers. I hadn't quite focused that now with more and more of our seniors vaccinated, they were not open for business. In our nursing homes, for example, we're now allowing visitations because people have been vaccinated. So I think that's really key to mental health. The vaccination passports is interesting. I've had a fair number of conversations about that. Something we're going to look at, not now, because right now, not everybody is eligible for the vaccines. That would be fundamentally unfair. But within a month or two, when broad cross section of people are vaccinated, or at least have the opportunity to be vaccinated, I think local businesses, for starters, are going to probably take the lead on this. I noticed that Carnival Cruise Line is launching their first cruise for vaccinated only people. Remember, the cruise lines got hit really hard a year ago, so they have to earn back people's confidence. I've talked to folks in the Restaurant Association. They're thinking out loud. They're saying, 25 years ago, we had a smoking and a non-smoking section. Who knows? Maybe we'll have a vaccinated and an unvaccinated section. So these are the ways that people are beginning to think about the nature of the vaccination passport or vaccination authentication. And we got to make sure we do it, respecting civil liberties and people's privacy. But I think you're going to see a lot of creative ideas coming out of it. And finally, Mary, that'll give more people an incentive to get vaccinated. If you're a white male Republican, you feel a little grumpy about getting vaccinated, maybe NASCAR says you got to get vaccinated and come in and see a race. Maybe some more people will get vaccinated.
Again, you can join us, 888-720-9677. We just have a couple minutes left with Governor Lamont. A lot of people want to know about vaccinations, but I wanted to talk about something else. Over the last couple of weeks, the state has reached a deal with the two tribes in our state to expand gambling. This would allow online sports betting. Can you talk about why this is necessary, Governor?
Yeah, Lucy, it's it's something that's been on and off negotiations going on a decade. If we learned one thing over the course of the last 12 months is that more and more of the world is going virtual, telehealth, telecommuting, teleeducation, and there's gambling and is no different. I mean, you're seeing what's going on at the casinos themselves is, not ramping up at this point. And iGaming, they call it, is taking off in different parts of the country. So in order, to work with our tribal partners to give them that opportunity and to work with the Lottery Corporation itself, which is by the state, we thought it was good that they be able to, compete and bring gaming into the 21st century. As an aside, I can tell you it raises a lot of money for the state as well, things we can invest back in social services. So we're going to do it cautiously, but we're going to do it. And I really applaud our partners for sitting down at the table and getting it done.
People are concerned that when you enable gambling to be on any smartphone or laptop, that this is going to really increase problem gambling, Governor.
I tell you, I think it's happening. We can pretend that it's not. I can tell you that they're going to other states. They're going to Rhode Island, right now to do this. I can tell you that we are monitoring this carefully. If people are doing a lot of betting online, we can see if there looks like there's a problem there, and we can alert them. We've looked at the history with other states. I think this is something we can manage and manage well to the benefit of the state.
I want to fit in one more call, Governor Lamont. So many people are waiting to speak with you. Christian in West Hartford. Christian, quickly go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Vaccinations are the response, as are other mandates, closures, what have you. I want to know what you've learned from this from a fiscal standpoint for small businesses, as we've all been closed and, we're going to be facing increased taxes going forward. Is there anything the state is going to be doing going forward after this to prepare for the next respiratory virus or what have you? I just think there's a lot of things we can learn from this to prepare for the next version, whatever we have.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Christian. I think I heard it right, which is how do we think about what could be another pandemic? This 100-year storm may be a 10-year storm, and we better prepare for it. In particular, how does that impact small businesses and Look, small business got hit and hit hard, and you have been incredibly creative. We never closed things down totally, I hope, but we said only for pickup to start up. And then we limited the number of people who could be indoors. And small business appreciated, restaurants appreciated that it wasn't simply, coming from the governor. They knew that they had to earn the confidence of consumers to go back into their store. They had to earn the confidence of employees, to come back into work. So I think that's one of the learning lessons. I really appreciate the fact that the federal government was very helpful, and David Lamont and our team provided the bridge loans to keep our businesses intact as best we could, as they struggled through the worst of the pandemic. So we get this, terrible thing behind us. We're ready to hit the ground running, and our stores are ready to open. And I'd like to think your store is opening. And I'd like to think consumers are beginning to knock on the door and come back in.
That's Governor Ned Lamont. Governor, I hope we can sit down for a full hour when this pandemic is over. So many people still waiting to speak with you, but we appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Lucy. Let's do it.
This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Our time was short with Governor Lamont, but there's still a lot of time to talk about what we just heard, including some analysis and perspective from Hartford Courant columnist Kevin Rennie. That's coming up right after the break. This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. We just heard from Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont. We were hoping to have more time with him, but he had to run. Joining us now on Zoom, Hartford Courant columnist Kevin Rennie. Kevin, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you for inviting me. It's nice to be here.
So
I will do my best to hold up the standard the governor set.
Well, I wanted to get your perspective on what you just heard from the governor. I mean, we covered a lot related to reopening, this vaccine plan, is it equitable, and also talking a little bit about his emergency authority. So first off, just give me some of your thoughts.
It's clear that the governor has lived this for more than a year. He is conversant and knowledgeable in every aspect of the pandemic that certainly has its affected Connecticut, and he seems really candid about the experience and what's worked, what hasn't worked, and how we go forward. And also, at least on your show, sounds receptive to ideas from callers. So I do think, and I would add my something that I've watched carefully all along. For the most part, he has exercised his extraordinary powers prudently. Not always, but for the most part, more than most human beings, given the virtually unlimited power that he had for a large part of this pandemic. I do think he's been prudent and responsible.
So there has been some pushback, of course, on extending these emergency authorities. We heard from some Republican leaders who don't think this is necessary. And so I just wanted to talk through what you're seeing in terms of this playing out, which lawmakers are in the room to negotiate this and which ones are left out, Kevin.
I do think I think the governor indicated a couple of times that he's ready for the legislature to start acting and invited them to. Of course, his first year, it all seems so long ago, but in 2019, in his first year as governor, he had a terrible time with the legislature on his hallmark issue, which was imposing tolls on working people in Connecticut, and he failed, and he for months he seemed kind of bitter about that. Last year, he didn't have to deal with the legislature. So now that they're back, it is a new experience in some ways. And I think he's right. If they're in session, they can make changes to the law on emergency powers, the things that the governor needs to do, they can adopt in the legislature. Things that he doesn't need, they can discard. My impression was the governor himself thought that his emergency powers should be coming to an end next month. And it's Democratic legislators who seem so eager to abandon their democratic prerogatives as an equal branch of government. So it must be frustrating for him in some ways.
It is interesting when we think about how quickly the legislature can act. I mean, you're a former legislator. Will the General Assembly be capable of making some tough decisions rather quickly down the road?
Well, they can. You know, there's a process in the legislature that allows emergency bills where the leadership can together put forward emergency bills that can be acted on immediately. And that authority will still be there. They now know how they can gather. It's becoming safer and safer for people to get together. I do think that it's bad for everyone that the public does not have direct access to legislators because the legislative office building is closed. And I think it's especially bad for legislators that they don't have the spontaneity that's an important part of the legislative process because they're not with each other. And probably most legislators will have had their first vaccination given by because of the age cohorts in a few weeks. So I think they should want to go back to legislating the way they used to, although maybe some changes in the substance of what they do to Connecticut, but the process, they want to resume that. And also it will set an important example for the rest of the state.
Kevin, Rennie, we ran out of time with the governor to talk about the state house approving a bill just last week that would give lawmakers more say in how the state uses $2.6 billion in federal pandemic relief funds. So can you talk through with us, again, how you see this playing out in terms of the governor having to disclose how they want to use the money and how lawmakers have priorities as well?
The governor can veto that bill. He has that right, no matter what sort of situation the state is in. He can veto it. He can try to negotiate changes. This sounds a little bit like an attempt to have a local version of earmarks, and that is getting money for favored projects. It's a little early to tell, but there are some restraints, some constraints on how states can use that money. So the governor might want to have his budget director, who can be quite firm in her talks with the legislature, explain to them, you don't have the discretion that you may think you have, and if this leads to a confrontation between the governor and the legislature, that's all right. That's all right. It might limber everyone up from what we've lived through in the past year.
You mentioned OPM Budget Director Melissa McCaw, and when we hear lawmakers wanting the governor to set aside more funding for initiatives or organizations that have really seen their funding cut, including so many nonprofits that provide the bulk of social services on behalf of the state, there's a real fear that while they might be able to do this with the federal stimulus money, what happens in the out years after 2024, Kevin?
Well, that's always the issue. Is that when you get when the state receives a boost, a one-time payment from the federal government, very few people then want to recognize that, okay, that was for a temporary period. They want it to continue, and then it's viewed as cuts in services and cuts in funding, and that will be a very big challenge for Governor Lamont and whoever. Assuming if he's reelected, it will be a continuing challenge. If he's not, it will be a new challenge. One of the, any governor is going to face the problem of there are limited ways to cut state spending because of the long-term agreements with state employees, and the governor has said he does not want to lay off state workers. So the only way to keep some of these funds continuing to social service organizations, for example, would be to raise taxes. And he's 1 year away from an election. He is certainly not going to want to talk about that. So it's the continuing challenge of what happens when you receive a big federal payment for a specific emergency condition. What do you do after that? Because people feel like as recipients, once they start getting that money, they don't want it to go away, and they are very skillful at showing the consequences of it being reduced.
Speaking of money, we talked briefly with the governor about this new gambling expansion deal with the two tribes. Him talking about this could bring a lot of money for Connecticut, something that could help when we think about the slot revenues that Connecticut has been dependent on, billions of dollars that has been decreasing steadily. I think the Connecticut Lottery actually makes more revenue now for the state than slots. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how this deal came about, and poor East Windsor, out of luck for this slots parlor.
Well, I would say their luck returned when the slot shack was abandoned. There were questions about there were doubts that was ever going to be built. I didn't think it should be built because it's not on tribal. It's not on tribal land, and that's the premise of the tribal nations having the right to operate casino gaming in Connecticut based on where the reservations are, and there's not one in East Windsor. That was solely to try to blunt the impact of the MGM casino in Springfield, and the MGM casino in Springfield, I think, has turned out to be, if not a bust, certainly it has not met the expectations that the state set for it, the state of Massachusetts set for it, even before the pandemic. So the East Windsor box of slots became really unnecessary once it became clear that the MGM casino was really no threat to the tribal casinos. But I think the governor has managed to work out a terrible deal with the tribes, and there's no reason to give the tribes a monopoly on iGaming. There are plenty of other companies that can do this. They should have been given the opportunity to make proposals. Their proposals might, the governor points out, it's a lot of money. Their proposals might have provided the state with even more money, because this is the business they're in. The casinos are not, the two tribal casinos, they're not in the business of iGaming. These other companies are. We should take advantage of their knowledge, their entrepreneurship, and really add an important element of competition into this. And the governor didn't, and I really do think he failed. And the state lottery corporation, has been nothing but trouble to give them really the ability or power to open gaming parlors on street corners as pseudo entertainment centers is well, you do not want to bet on that. A terrible gamble by the governor. And as I said, he's done a very good job on COVID. He's terrible on changes in gaming policy.
So talk more about permitting other companies to get in on this, and how sport tech, how they will play out in this. Do you anticipate lawsuits because this deal has been reached and people feel like they should be able to have a cut as well? Kevin?
I want, well, of course, MGM was very litigious minded with the East Windsor casino, and I would not be surprised if other companies that have had, as the governor said, they're doing great in other states. Well, why wouldn't we want them to do great in Connecticut if we make the decision to expand gaming? Let's open it up to proposals from the people who already know how to do it. The tribes have no experience in this. They're casino operators. So, maybe they'll partner with others, but let's have a festival of competition on this. And, I believe the legislature is going to have to decide whether to adopt any of these proposals. So let them have some choices, and let's see let's see who has the best. For instance, as the issue was raised in your interview, let's see who has the best ideas for addressing problem gamblers, and how many points do you get for that in your proposal? A lot of this was done. Well, all of this was done in secret, and it's sort of surprising that for a former newspaper editor, Governor Lamont does have an exaggerated taste for secrecy in his administration, and the pandemic has only magnified that. But now he's doing the same thing with this gaming proposal, and it'd be very costly for people in Connecticut.
So you mentioned that the General Assembly has to weigh in and pass a bill related to expanding gambling. Also, the Interior Department will also have to weigh in. Before we run out of time, let's finish and talk a little bit about some lawmakers who were very well known in Connecticut politics, both passing away, Billy Ciotto and House Majority Leader David Pudlin.
Yes, very sad weekend for people certainly people in central Connecticut, who they represented for many years, but also for people all over Connecticut who were involved in politics at any level. Billy Ciotto was a beloved figure, a entertaining guy, knew how to get things done in state government. He had been, before he was elected to the Senate, we were elected in the same year. He lasted there a lot longer than I did, but he really knew how to move the levers. And he was of state government. And he was very generous with other legislators, Republican or Democrat, in helping them with problems that he had more experience in solving. And, I wouldn't say that's unheard of, but that is not a characteristic that every legislator brings to state politics. And he was also a character with that cigar and his voice, very distinctive voice. And politics doesn't have a lot of characters in it anymore. And I think that that everybody he was naturally likable. And David Pudlin was part of a group of legislators who were recruited in the 1980s by Irving Stolberg, when he was briefly the minority leader. Republicans controlled the House for 2 years after President Reagan's landslide, and he recruited an array of liberal local Democrats who went on to all sorts of important positions, including Nancy Wyman, who was the lieutenant governor, and Joe Courtney, who still serves in Congress. And David Pudlin, I think, was part of that. And he continued after leaving the House. He continued in politics and organizing politics, and I think with locally and also with statewide organizations. He was really committed to democratic politics.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us here, Kevin Rennie, who's a Hartford Courant columnist. We appreciate your time. You can also follow Kevin at Daily Ructions. Kevin, thank you.
You're welcome, Lucy. Thank you.
This is Where We Live. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Matt Dwyer produced today's show. Tess Terrible was on the phones. And Kat Pastor is our technical producer. Back tomorrow.